Close your eyes, open your mind. Let the day unlace itself and slip quietly from your shoulders. A deeper hush gathers now, like mist lifting from the river and folding over the fields. You are safe here. Your breath can be slow. Your thoughts can arrive the way autumn leaves arrive at a brook, one at a time, drifting, circling, settling. We are going to Sleepy Hollow. It sits shy of the Hudson, a cradle of low hills and close woods, a place the map records but the night truly keeps. The valley wears a soft weight, the way old timber carries the scent of fires long gone. Even before you know a single tale, you feel it, a mild pressure at the temples, a hush in the hedgerows, as if someone has just finished speaking, and the silence is listening for the echo. The Dutch came first with ploughs and hymns, cider presses and stubborn prayers, and found the soil obliging, black and crumbly, and rich with promise. They raised barns whose beams still show the adze marks and drove fence posts that sprouted their own modest moss. They brought superstitions, too, not as decorations but as tools. Warnings and kindnesses shaped to fit a world where weather and fate often worked in secret. They buried iron spikes under thresholds to keep malice out, tucked sprigs of rowan above lintels, stitched tiny witch knots in the corners of quilts. They did not say the valley was haunted in daylight. They said it was attended. At dusk, attendance becomes presence. Listen, a mill pond holds its breath so carefully that stars can find themselves in it like lost coins. Listen again, a hushing at the edges of the fields, as if the rye knows a word you don't, and keeps it kindly. The church steeple pricks the sky, not stern, only steady, and the bell inside it is patient. It has no quarrel with night. On the lane, apple-scent pools in little hollows, heavier where wind cannot reach. The fences lean the way neighbors do, pleased to share their weight with time. It is here, in the intervals between chores and winter, that the legends collect. They are not frantic. They do not bang on shutters or rattle chains for sport. They are as the place is, consistent. The hollow keeps a catalogue of the past and consults it nightly. A woman in white walks at first light with her gaze turned to the river. Dew slicks the hem of her gown and never stains it. Lights drift in the marsh, pale as thistledown, luring the curious a dozen paces off the path and no more. The wise turn back, the stubborn sleep on the tussocks and wake with reeds in their hair. In fog thick as milk, soldiers pass sometimes. Two ranks, muskets shouldered, no sound of drum. They do not look left or right. The earth makes room. There is a schoolhouse, too, at the wood's lip, a plain little thing that leans the way old men lean at a fence. By day, chalk squeaks, slates scrape, and children recite the tidy measurements of the world. At night, when heat leaves the shingles and mice take the floor's groove for a road, neighbors say they hear lessons softly repeated, not quite in any child's voice, and a faint tapping as if a ruler asks for order in an empty room. No one is scolded. Nothing is wrong. The building remembers its purpose and keeps it. All of these are steady presences, but above them rides the valley's single sentence, written over and over in hoof marks along the lanes, the Headless Horseman. A Hessian, they say, cut down in the Revolution by iron fired hot and fast, his head carried from him in a single brutal clarity. Men buried the body in consecrated ground at the old Dutch church, as close to comfort as they could contrive, and searched the field for what could not be found. The ground will answer most questions if you work it long enough. Not that one. So the story rides. Some nights you feel him first in your knees. A tremor you tell yourself is weather. Some nights, the dog that never barks goes to the doorway, stands large and uncertain, and sits down again, having decided that the night will pass whether warned or not. When the moon is thin as a sickle, and the orchards are sweet with rot, when smoke lies low over the river, and frost, has the courtesy to wait at the field's edge the rider moves. A cloak where a face should be. A mount whose breath hangs and then breaks. Not cruel, not kind, bound. They say the bridge by the church is the hinge on which he turns. Some insist he cannot cross it, others that it is the one place he must cross, again and again, because the story requires a point of return. Both versions are true in a valley, where truth is a matter of rhythm. Into this place came a lanky schoolmaster from away, Ichabod Crane. Long in limb, longer in appetite, his curiosity stitched to his caution with a thin but serviceable thread. He carried 2 worn books, a fiddle, and a collection of hymns that he sang in a thoughtful, reedy tenor whenever a road grew narrow. He taught sums and psalms with sufficient sternness to satisfy parents, and sufficient patience to keep children from plotting a mutiny in ink. He was welcome at every table because his praise of a pie was a minor sermon, and because he could be relied upon to bring gossip from one end of the valley to the other without spilling it. Most evenings, after the last slate was stacked and the stove pinched to embers, he walked the lanes to whichever household promised stew or cider or a circle of chairs around a sensible fire. He never pressed the talk towards spirits. He only leaned in when the talk went there of its own accord, as it always does by the second mug. Hoofbeats, one farmer would say, where there isn't a road. Lanterns, a widow would add, eyes on her hands. Where there isn't a man, a laugh would travel the rafters and come back changed into something more careful. And Ichabod would nod, as if adding columns that would surely total in time. If his eye lingered at Baltus Van Tassel's table longer than at others, the valley forgave him. Katrina, apple bright, quick as a river current, that looks slow until you step into it, kept the room tuned to a cheerful key. Her father's barns held a winter for 6 families if it came to that. His orchards wore October like jewelry. Suitors arrived the way starlings do, noisy and in number. Among them rode brombones, thick through the shoulders with a laugh built to be heard in wind. He could toss a sack of grain into a loft and a rival into a snowbank with about the same thought. If he met a tale of fear, he met it head on. And if he met a dare, he no longer met it because he had already accepted it. The hollow is generous with food and sparing with certainty. A man can think he is courting a woman when he is in fact courting a future. A man can think he is courting a future when he is in fact drawing a legend closer. Meanwhile, the orchards continue to offer their crisp arithmetic, one apple, then another, and the church continues to strike its modest notes into the evening, and the bridge remains the bridge. Before we follow Ichabod to the night that the valley keeps at the front of its ledger, come walk a little further through the catalogue the Dutch compiled. At the river bend where the water braids around a little island of reeds, a peddler was once found with his pockets turned out, and his lantern still burning beside him. They buried him as best they could, and set his goods by for any claimant who could prove a memory stronger than a greed. Some nights the lantern returns to the bank. It does not move along the path. It simply brightens, as if a man has just cupped his hand around the glass to shield it, and then dims, as if he has withdrawn it again. It is not an invitation. It is not a warning. It is a notation, this happened here. On the ridge, 2 elms grew together and braided their branches so closely that from a distance they looked like one tree disciplined into virtue. Up close, the bark shows the slow argument. This trunk says turn, that trunk says stay. Travellers took to leaving a button or a coin between them for luck in choice-making. The wind there is finicky, never still, never sure. On certain evenings a scrap of hymn comes riding it from the church hill and never makes it all the way down. In a pasture no longer pasturing anything but fog, there is the suggestion of a circle, flattened each fall as regular as harvest. Some years it is starker, some years faint. The Dutch call it a place where last year's dancing returns to practice. Youths with more nerve than sense sit within it to dare the night to find them. It always does, though usually only with cold and the sudden wish to be braver at home than in a field. The valley does not embarrass them. It lets them learn. Among these unhurried marvels, the rider is the valley's single necessity, and because he is necessary, he is never shouted. Even his hoofbeats do not arrive as an alarm. They arrive as weather arrives, there, then nearer, then all around, then gone. Ichabod had lived in the hollow long enough to know the timetables of weather. He could point to a cloud the size of a hand and tell you to cover the hay now, not in an hour. He could say smoke and tell you whose chimney it was by the way the ribbon of it held or folded. He had also lived long enough to learn the ways in which fear likes to be fed: a late road, a thin moon, a story repeated just a shade more softly than last time. He fed it, now and then, because he was human. And because afterward he slept the sleep a man sleeps who has outwitted his own imagination for another night. On a certain evening it does not matter which for dates, but it matters for apples, which were at their honestest sweetness. Baltus Van Tassel's hall glowed like a barn full of August sunlight that had somehow kept warm through October. Lanterns threw their small suns into the rafters, fiddles took the measure, and tables said here, here, and here again, with pies and roasts and breads that remembered the hands that kneaded them. Ichabod's compliments worked as intended. Katrina's laughter made the corners of the room lighter. Brom's grin did its usual damage to the nerves of men who wanted to occupy the space where he currently stood. Feasting takes its time. Stories take the time feasting leaves. When the bow-hair frayed and the last ladle found the bottom of the pot, chairs edged closer to the hearth. The room learnt the new shape of attention. An old farmer went first, as is right, because he remembered a night when the fog was so thick the cowbells sounded like they were hung from clouds. He told of a steady gallop that circled him, though he never saw the horse, and of how the sound fell away at the bridge like a rain that stops at a fence. A widow spoke next, in the gentle voice people use when they have survived more than one kind of winter. She said she had heard a rider pass beneath her window, and watched the candle die for no reason she could accept. In the morning there were hoof marks too deep for the animal any neighbor owned. She had no lesson to offer. She had left a slice of bread on the sill that night, and slept afterward as if she had done a kindness and been thanked for it. Brombones, of course, brought loud weather with him when his turn came. He claimed, with the handful of seriousness that makes a boast walk like a story, that he had raced the rider himself and smelled brimstone at the bridge where the legend is supposed to end. The laughter that followed was what it needed to be. Eager, a little relieved, unwilling to ask which part of the tale had salted whose pride. Through it all, Ichabod listened. He was not envying or mocking, he was absorbing. The room's breath, the fire's logic, the way the panes breathed a little when the wind pressed them. He took that in too. He took in the part where the horseman is a caution, and the part where he is a comfort, because people keep what they fear in front of them so they can see it, and what is seen cannot walk up behind you. When he stepped out at last into the lane, the hollow received him, as it receives anyone who leaves a lit room for a dark road, with a brief, polite pause while your eyes learn their work again. The night had settled into its clear voice. The moon said just enough to its well-placed clouds to keep attention. The road shone in places like pewter, warmed by breath. Gunpowder, the borrowed plough horse whose virtues were patience and an ability to believe the best would happen eventually, stood where he had been tied, and had already forgiven Ichabod for being late. Leather creaked. The girth welcomed the troublesome length of the man who tugged at it. Hooves found their first answers in the dust. The bridge lay somewhere ahead, as all bridges do, not yet needed, not yet named. The church stood where it always stands, neither promising nor refusing, simply offering the same shape to every night. The lane asked for small things first, a little trust, a little listening, a little reminder that breath can be counted on. And in the hedgerow, the hollow rearranged its chairs, as it does, because a story was leaving one room and would need a place to sit in another, breathe. The road goes on. The legends travel with it, soft-footed, unhurried. We will follow, quietly. The Van Tassel farmhouse glowed against the night like a lantern set deep in the valley. Its windows spilled light into the orchards. Its beams held warmth, as if the timbers themselves remembered summers past. By the time Ichabod Crane arrived, gunpowder's old hooves clattering on the stones, the yard was alive with wagons, lanterns, and laughter. Inside, the air was golden with firelight and full with the sense of feast, roasted fowl with skins crisped to perfection, spiced pumpkin pies, fresh-baked bread soft as clouds, apples stewed in cider until their fragrance hung heavy in the rafters. Long tables bent under the abundance. Chairs scraped, fiddles whined, boots thudded in dance. Ichabod, tall and awkward, bowed his way among the guests, his hungry eyes gleaming at both the food and the hostess's daughter, Katrina. She was bright and plump as an orchard apple, cheeks warmed by laughter, her hand light as a bird's wing when he guided her onto the floor. For a time, the lanky schoolmaster let himself believe fortune had tilted toward him. But the hollow was listening. The hollow always listens. When the dancing quieted, the chairs gathered nearer the hearth. Shadows stretched themselves against the rafters, and the talk, as it always does in Sleepy Hollow, bent toward its ghosts. An old farmer leaned forward, his hands rough as bark. He spoke of riding home from market and hearing hoofbeats on the ridge. They followed him, though no rider was seen. Faster he rode, faster they followed, until at the bridge by the church they vanished, as if the planks had swallowed the sound. His voice fell low, and the fire popped in the silence. A widow nodded and told her story. One night she heard a rider pass beneath her window, though the lane was empty. Her candle blew out, though the shutters were closed. In the morning she found hoofprints pressed deep into the earth, circling her house as if marking her in silence. She placed bread on her sill that night, and never again did the hoofbeats linger. A huntsman swore he had seen the rider himself, a great black horse, a cloak billowing where no head sat upon the shoulders. He had fired his musket, but the figure did not falter, only vanished into mist, the ball falling useless at the hunter's feet. Then Brombones, the boldest of the valley, laughed and swore he had raced the rider himself. They had thundered neck and neck along the lane until Brom reached the bridge. There, he claimed, the spectre had turned to smoke, leaving only the smell of brimstone in the air. The room laughed, yet the laughter was edged with unease, for the boldest boasts are often born of brushes with fear. Through it all, Ichabod listened with rapt attention. His imagination, already fertile, wove each tale into his mind's fabric. The horseman seemed to grow taller, darker, more inevitable with every word spoken. And when he left the warmth of the Van Tassel hearth that night, the valley met him with silence as deep as water. The road stretched ahead, narrow and twisting between orchards and fields. The moon hung pale above, clouds drifting like tattered sails across its face. The brook whispered unseen, its voice faint but insistent. The trees leaned close, their branches skeletal, their shadows reaching across the lane like fingers. Gunpowder plodded steadily at first, the reins creaking in Ichabod's hands. To soothe himself, he sang softly, hymns in a thin, reedy voice. The notes drifted upward and dissolved into the mist, leaving the silence heavier than before. Every rustle made him start. A bird stirred in the hedgerow and his heart leapt. A branch cracked under its own weight, and his breath caught. He remembered each tale told by the hearth, The invisible hoofbeats, the circling prints, the vanishing figure. He thought of the widow's candle, of the hunter's musket ball falling useless, of Bromburn's boast of smoke and brimstone. The hollow pressed close. The road bent, shadows deepened, mist curled low. Ichabod gripped the reins tighter. His voice faltered, his song thinned, and the silence grew thick around him, as if the night itself were listening. Then he heard it. A sound beneath the brook's whisper, slow at first, muffled, as if wrapped in fog, then clearer, the steady, rhythmic thunder of hooves. He turned in the saddle. At first he saw only the mist, then a shape, a figure astride a great horse, cloaked in black, massive and looming, its breath pluming white in the cold night. Where the rider's head should be, there was nothing, only darkness. The Headless Horseman, he did not speak. He never speaks. The night speaks for him, tightening, deepening, until even gunpowder's breath sounds loud in the hush. Ichabod's fingers tightened on the reins. A single thought gathered itself like a lamp cupped against wind: the bridge. If the old whisper was true, the consecrated ground beyond the span would break the pursuit. If the whisper was true— "Steady, boy," he murmured, though the steadiness he asked for belonged as much to his own bones as to the horse beneath him. Gunpowder lifted into a halting canter. Leather creaked, iron struck stone. The lane slid by in a dark ribbon. Hedge, ditch, fence, a gleam of water where the brook curled close. Behind them, the other hooves fell into rhythm, not hurried, not wild, only inevitable. Ichabod risked a look. The figure held to them as a shadow holds to a body, matched in distance, matched in speed. Cloak rising, horse surging, that absence where a face should be, darker than any branch or sky. It was not a mask, it was a missing. The mist thickened at the low places, spread like milk poured carefully along the ground. Sound bent in it. Hoofbeats seemed to come from the lane, the hedgerow, the creek bed all at once. Ichabod's hymn, quietly offered, broke to pieces and fell back into him as breath. They passed the old schoolhouse, slanting and small at the wood's lip. For a heartbeat, Ichabod thought the window held a pale face, the kind children draw without knowing how to finish the mouth. Then the glass was only glass again, taking moon where it could find it. The rider's cadence did not change. They reached the cursed elm at the crossroads, two great arms thrown up against the sky in the shape of a never-finished plea. Gunpowder balked. Ichabod urged him on with a word that was mostly air. In the bark, eyes suggested themselves, sunk and patient. He did not look again. The lane bent, the elm slid behind them. The hoofbeats came with them, exact as a clock that refuses to be hurried or delayed. Now the mill pond. Its skin was a smooth, held breath. A ripple crossed it from no wind at all, as if something turned beneath and settled again. Ichabod kept his eyes on the paler run of the road. He knew the pond's stories. He did not need another. The ridge lifted and fell. The church steeple pricked the sky ahead, thin as a needle, steady as a thought you refuse to let go of. Between here and there, the bridge, no more than timber, rail, and habit, but the valley's hinge all the same. "On," Ichabod whispered, and the word was softer than leather. Gunpowder answered, as a tired thing answers when kindness asks it for one more kindness. The lane narrowed, tunneled under branches knitted close. Leaves brushed Ichabod's coat with the discretion of old friends. The rider drew nearer, not lunging, not leaping, only closing the difference between memory and presence. A breath of wind slid down the hill. It brought the smell of apples stored cool in cellars, and a thread of smoke from some far kitchen where a pot consented to simmer till morning. Ichabod felt briefly, inexplicably, like weeping. Then the creek's thin chatter found his ear, and the feeling folded itself away for later. The bridge, at last. Pale planks. A rail rubbed smooth by years of hands. The creek below working its small arithmetic of stones. The church beyond like a promise a man keeps because he said he would, not because he expects anything in return. Gunpowder lunged for the first board. The span took their weight and gave it back in a hollow drum-like note, then another, then a quickening run of them. The sound made a roof over the creek's whisper. It sounded like a column of breathsy amens spoken into old wood. Behind, an alteration in air, the rider rising in his stirrups. Ichabod turned because men do, because the old compulsion to witness can be stronger than the wish to be spared. He saw the dark arm lift and wheel. Something left that arm round and heavy, humming a short, cruel music through the night. It struck. Light broke, sound unstitched. The saddle went out from under him and the boards came up, and then stopped being boards at all. Silence took careful possession of the bridge. Hooves thundered past, one last confirmed heartbeat of pursuit, and then the pursuit was elsewhere, or nowhere, or continuing without the need to be seen. The timbers hummed with the memory of weight. The creek resumed its task, pleased to be allowed to go on describing stones. Time was a patient animal. It stayed near until Ichabod could borrow it again. First a breath, unsteady. Then the inventory of aches that the body writes in chalk-down bone. Then the world assembling itself around him in workable pieces. Cold rail under hand, hat by the post, the wet glitter of smashed pumpkins strewn like little moons across the planks. For a while he did not move beyond those facts. He looked at the place where the air still felt slightly rearranged. He put his palm to the bridge, the way a man might touch a friend's shoulder in gratitude for not leaving. He found gunpowder loose and waiting down the lane, and the horse, who had never pretended to be a hero, let the bridle be taken and laid his warm muzzle against the sleeve of a man who had never pretended to be one either. They stood, a pair of breathing things in a valley that breathes. Then they went, not quickly, not triumphantly. Step by modest step, the way you leave a room that has told you something, carrying that something in both hands so you don't spill. Morning came as it does here, reluctant at first, then resigned, then making a decent showing of it. Mist clung low where fences hold it back. The church roof took light in a thin run along one edge. On the bridge, a hat. On the boards, seeds like small coins and strings of pulp that already promised vines to any spring with time to listen. Neighbors found these things and let them mean what they have always meant. Some said the rider took him, and the valley tightened its shawl and nodded. Some said he fled before shame and laughter could do their separate works, and the valley nodded at that too, because men do sometimes. Some said Brombones knew more than his grin would admit. The grin did not disagree. The grin did not agree. It kept the weather fair around the mouth, and rode home with Katrina sitting bright beside it. The schoolhouse never minded being empty for a little while. Buildings rest, as creatures do. Another voice would find the room. Another ruler would tap the steady beat by which small minds grow large enough to be careful. Children would learn their sums and their letters beneath a roof that murmured in winter and clicked in summer. And some of them would discover that stories add up differently than numbers do, and are no less true for it. And the horseman? The valley continues to make room. On thin moon nights, when orchards loosen and smoke goes wandering, he moves along the ridges and beside the churchyard wall and across the bridge that both binds and frees him. He is neither anger nor mercy. He is remainder, what cannot be resolved and will not be thrown away. The hollow carries him as a river carries a reflection. Always there and never held. If you listen for him, you will sometimes hear nothing. If you forget to listen, a rhythm will remind you from the ground, not an alarm, only a measure. You might set your steps to it without thinking. You might sleep to it, the way a child sleeps in a cart while the wheels keep saying the same round word. So the tale folds back upon itself and waits. The church bell gives a single well-mannered note to mark a passing hour. A gate which sticks for everyone, sticks and is lifted and then behaves. A woman shakes a cloth from a porch and turns dust into light. In a field where the circle shows again, two youths swear. They saw lanterns in the marsh and agree, without agreeing, not to follow them this year. You are here at the edge where stories let you go. The rider has passed you by. The bridge has kept its counsel. The creek continues its soft accounting. Nothing presses you now. The hollow's weight is a blanket, not a burden. Breathe in, apples, wood smoke, a clean thread of cold. Breathe out, the long, even exhale of a place that has made peace with its own echoes. If sleep wants you, let it come the way fog comes, thoroughly, from the ankles upward, asking nothing more than stillness. If dreams want you, let them be lanes with forgiving shoulders, and a horse with sense enough to find the center, and a church steeple that never hurries you, only points the way a little. The legends will go on without you tonight. They prefer that. They know how. The horseman rides whether watched or not. The bridge keeps the list whether read or not. The hollow remembers for you. Close your eyes. The hoofbeats are far now, part of the ground's private music. The story has become the air has become the hush has become the bed. Quiet, quieter, gone.